The Galactic Council met in its grand chamber, a place of infinite grandeur, with towering spires that reached towards a lightless void above the room, was filled with representatives from all corners of the galaxy, each one a leader of their respective race, each one carrying the weight of their civilization upon their shoulders. The council had convened in response to a troubling incident. A young human child had stumbled upon an artifact buried deep within the surface of an alien world. The artifact was of immense power and significance, known only to a few in the council, but it was not meant to be touched by outsiders, much less a species as young and untested as humanity. The child had unknowingly activated the relic, and in doing so triggered an alarm that echoed across the galaxy, an alarm that summoned the council's immediate attention. The child's family had no idea what their daughter had done. They were simply visiting a distant planet on a peaceful trip when their daughter wandered away and found the artifact by accident. Her innocent curiosity had brought her to the relic, and her touch had awakened ancient systems that had remained dormant for millennia. But this was of little concern to the council. The artifact was too valuable, too dangerous, to be left in the hands of an unworthy species. The humans were beneath them in their eyes, their history still one of war and struggle in the vastness of the stars, their power small compared to the long-established races of the galaxy. The council deliberated in their cold, calculating manner, their voices echoing in the vast chamber, each species adding their opinion, but none offering any empathy for the child's fate. Earth's representatives pleaded with the council to understand the mistake, to recognize that no harm had been done, that the child had not known the significance of the artifact. But the council had already made their decision. They would not allow such an act to go unpunished. They would make an example of the child, so that no species would dare to trespass on their domain again. The verdict was swift and final. The child would be executed, and the message sent across the galaxy was clear: humanity was not to be trusted, and any further violations would be met with severe retribution. Earth's representatives were left in shock, their pleas falling on deaf ears. The room grew heavy with a silence that spoke volumes. The fate of one innocent child had been sealed, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. A young child had been sentenced to death by the most powerful beings in the galaxy for an act she did not understand, for a mistake that no one could have predicted. The world's leaders were in disbelief. They had known that tensions were high between Earth and the Council, but they had never imagined something like this could happen. They could not fathom the cruelty of such a decision, and yet there it was, clear as day. An innocent life was about to be extinguished, and there was no way to stop it. In the streets of Earth, people cried out in anger. They could feel the injustice deep within their bones. A rage that had long been suppressed began to bubble to the surface. It was no longer about a single child. It was about something much bigger. It was about humanity's place in the galaxy, and the cruelty that had been visited upon them for far too long. No longer would Earth remain silent. No longer would they let their people be trampled upon by alien powers. And so, the seeds of rebellion were sown on that fateful day when the Council sealed the fate of a child and unwittingly awakened something far greater than they had ever anticipated. Hidden within the heart of Earth's most secure location lay an ancient truth buried beneath decades of silence and secrecy. It had been a project of the early spacefaring days, when humanity first looked toward the stars, not with the hope of exploration, but with the understanding that one day their survival might depend on being able to defend themselves from the galaxy's more powerful civilizations. Long before first contact with the other races of the galaxy, Earth's leaders had foreseen the potential for conflict, and so they had built a fleet, one unlike any other, a fleet that could stand against the might of the most advanced and powerful species in the galaxy. This fleet was not like the ships humanity now used for peaceful exploration or trade. They were warships built from a time before humanity's technology had truly matured, crewed by the standards of the galaxy's elite races, but dangerous nonetheless. These ships were equipped with weapons and defenses derived from early human ingenuity. They had been constructed using materials and designs that even the Council's top engineers had failed to fully understand. Humanity had learned from its own trials and errors, developing weapons that could exploit the weaknesses of alien technology and tactics. The ships had been hidden away for a time, when the world would need them the most, when diplomacy would no longer be enough to protect Earth and its people. And that time had come. Earth's leaders had long hoped that such a day would never arrive, but with the death sentence now hanging over a young child, and the rage of an entire planet boiling beneath the surface, it was clear that the time for peaceful negotiations was over. The fleet had been dormant for years, its crew frozen in cryogenic stasis, awaiting a moment, such as this, a moment when they would be needed to defend the very survival of humanity. The captain of this fleet was a man who had once been considered a hero, a decorated officer who had helped lead the charge during humanity's early years in space. But after his service, he had been placed in stasis along with the rest of the crew as a precautionary measure in case Earth was ever pushed to the brink of war. Now Captain Jason Arcos awoke from cryostasis, disoriented and confused as the stasis pods around him powered down, and the cold, metallic walls of the ship came to life with lights and sounds. His crew followed suit, one by one emerging from their slumber as their systems came online. It took only moments for the captain to understand the gravity of the situation. He was briefed on the death sentence handed down by the Council. The child's death was not an isolated event. It was part of a larger pattern of galactic domination, one that had gone unchallenged for far too long. The reality of what had been set into motion sank in like a weight pressing down on Arcos's chest. He had fought in wars before, but this was different. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was a war for humanity's survival, a war for their right to exist in the galaxy without being at the mercy of others. He quickly convened a meeting with his senior officers. They were all still reeling from the shock of awakening, but their duty was clear. Earth had been wronged, and they would make sure that humanity would never be powerless again. The fleet's commander gave the order to begin preparations, and within hours the once dormant ships powered up their engines and began to move. The first human warships to leave Earth in decades were now on their way to deliver a message to the galaxy, one that would reverberate through every star system in the known universe. Humanity was no longer a passive bystander, no longer willing to accept the decisions of others. Without question, they would fight for their own future, and for the future of every innocent life that had been crushed under the weight of galactic authority. And so the fleet, long forgotten and left to gather dust, was now fully awake and ready to deliver its wrath upon those who had dared to take what was rightfully humanity's. The news of the Galactic Council's decision spread across Earth like wildfire. The entire planet united under the same banner of grief and fury, a collective outrage that transcended borders and divided ideologies. For the first time in human history, the people of Earth had a singular purpose, and it was driven by a primal desire for justice. The death of one child had ignited a firestorm of anger that could no longer be extinguished by diplomacy or empty promises. Earth's leaders were faced with a choice. They could no longer afford to hesitate. In a moment of clarity and shared purpose, humanity's political leaders put aside their differences. They had been divided on many issues, but now they found themselves in agreement. Earth's response would not be a plea for mercy or a token protest. They would not ask for forgiveness. They would take action and make their voice heard across the galaxy. The time for weakness was over. The time for standing idly by and hoping for peace had passed. At the helm of this movement was a man named President David Corran, a figure who had once been known for his diplomatic approach, but who now stood resolute in his decision to take Earth's future into their own hands. Corran was no longer the cautious politician he had been. He had become something far different, a leader forged by the fires of grief and rage, who now saw his role as the protector of humanity's place in the galaxy. The first order of business was clear. The fleet, hidden away for so long, had to be activated and brought into full readiness. Corran authorized the command to awaken the long-forgotten warships that had once been designed to defend Earth from the very situation they now found themselves in. It was an audacious move, one that would carry immense risk, but Corran understood that this was no longer about just one child. It was about the future of humanity and the message they would send to the stars. As Earth's leaders worked to organize the logistics of the fleet's deployment, the people of Earth began to rally behind the cause. Protests erupted in every major city, not against their government, but in support of its citizens of all backgrounds. gathered in massive crowds calling for vengeance for the innocent life lost, and for the reckoning that was long overdue. The anger that had been simmering for years under the surface of Earth's society was now unleashed. The oppressed had found their voice, and they were demanding justice. The atmosphere on Earth became electrified with a sense of purpose and unity that had been missing for generations. Even nations that had once been hesitant to embrace the idea of militarization now stood firm in their resolve. The Federation of Earth's military forces came together with a single goal in mind. The Galactic Council would be made to answer for its crimes, and Earth would not stand idly by as its people were crushed beneath the weight of galactic authority. At the secret military base where the fleet had been hidden, Arcos stood on the command deck of the lead ship, the Resolution, his mind racing with the enormity of the task ahead. But his heart was steady. The crew had been briefed on the mission, and they were ready to follow their captain into whatever battles lay ahead. Each of them had known the price of war, but they had also known what was at stake. This was no longer just about a child, or even about Earth. It was about standing up to those who thought they could trample on humanity's right to exist. The fleet was ready, their weapons primed, and their systems fully operational. And as Arcos looked out across the vast expanse of space ahead, he knew that this was only the beginning. The first wave would soon depart from Earth's orbit, and the message would be sent loud and clear across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a passive species. They had teeth, and they were not afraid to use them. It was time to show the stars that Earth would no longer be a pawn in a game it could not win. The fight for humanity's future had begun, and it would be a fight to the bitter end. The silence of space was shattered as Earth's long-dormant fleet powered to life, breaking through the shadows of its hidden bases and into the cold expanse of the cosmos. The ships, once silent and still, now hummed with the energy of awakening. They moved with purpose toward their target, a small, strategically important outpost on the fringe of Galactic Council-controlled space. This was no grand capital or military stronghold, but it was a symbol of the Council's reach into every corner of the galaxy, and it would be the first place to feel the wrath of humanity's newly awakened might. Captain Jason Arcos stood at the helm of the Resolution, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The mission was clear: strike quickly, decisively, and without mercy. The Council had made its decision. Now it was time for Earth to make its own, and Arcos knew that every minute of hesitation would give the Council time to react. This would not be a battle of slow, deliberate movements. This would be a lightning strike to remind the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The fleet moved with eerie precision, their massive warships slicing through the black void like shadows, stalking their prey in the distance. The target loomed, a Council outpost located on a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant. There were no civilian lives to protect, no innocents caught in the crossfire. Just an outpost meant to monitor and control the movements of spacefaring species outside of the Council's direct influence. Arcos gave the order to engage as the fleet closed in on the target. The Resolution and its fleetmates released their full complement of fighters and drones. In an instant, the skies above the moon ignited as the human ships unleashed a barrage of weapons that cut through the cold darkness like a violent storm. Plasma cannons roared, energy shields flared, and missile clusters rained down with deadly accuracy. The Council's defenses were antiquated by comparison, their weapons disoriented and scattered as the first wave of human firepower decimated their structures before they could even respond. The outpost, once a symbol of the Council's control, now burned bright in the vacuum of space. Its defensive systems struggled to react, but it was already too late. Arcos watched as the explosions rippled across the outpost's surface, knowing that this would be a message that could not be ignored, not just by the Council, but by every species in the galaxy who had thought themselves safe from Earth's wrath. As the last of the outpost's defenses crumbled, Arcos received the first sign of resistance: a small fleet of Council warships, perhaps stationed nearby for protection, dropped out of hyperspace to defend the station. But they were too late. The human fleet was already withdrawing. Its mission accomplished, Arcos had given them a show of force, and now they would leave the Council's forces with nothing but wreckage and the stark reminder of what Earth was capable of. But as Arcos looked at the destruction his fleet had wrought, he could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The battle had been swift and successful, but the real war was still ahead. Every star system, every planet, every race that had long been under the thumb of the Galactic Council would now be watching Earth's every move. This first strike had been a warning, but what would come next would define humanity's future in the galaxy. As the fleet turned its course back toward Earth, Arcos allowed himself only a brief moment of satisfaction. The mission had been successful, yes, but the battle for Earth's place in the stars was far from over. The true challenge lay ahead, and Earth would face it not as a helpless species, but as a force that had found its strength and would use it to carve out its place among the stars. The explosion of Earth's first strike echoed through the galaxy like a ripple across still water, but it was no ripple. It was a shockwave of unprecedented force, a signal that humanity, long thought insignificant, was now willing to wage war against the most powerful faction in the galaxy. The Galactic Council's carefully constructed image of invincibility began to crack as the news spread from system to system, from star to star. Planets once loyal to the Council now found themselves questioning their allegiances. The balance of power had shifted overnight. Across the galaxy, the response was one of disbelief. The Council, its members still reeling from the destruction of the outpost, convened in an emergency session. The news of Earth's audacious attack hit like a thunderclap. The representative from the Zorakian Dominion, a race known for its calculating nature, was the first to speak. He demanded to know how such an attack had been possible, how humanity had managed to secretly construct a fleet capable of striking against the might of the Council. The Zorakian ambassador's voice was thick with both anger and fear. The councilors' reactions were divided. Some called for swift retaliation. Others, more cautious, suggested they try to negotiate with Earth's leaders, a dangerous game, they argued, but the alternatives could lead to escalation. They had underestimated humanity for too long, and now they feared what other surprises Earth might have in store. Within hours of the attack, messages flooded in from all corners of the galaxy, but not all of them were in favor of the Council. Some systems, once loyal to the ruling body, were beginning to distance themselves. Others saw an opportunity in the chaos to break free from the Council's control. The Council had always ruled through fear, through domination, but it had never anticipated the possibility that a race like humanity, seen as primitive and unworthy, would rise up to challenge their authority. On Earth, the mood was one of uneasy triumph. The first victory was sweet, but its taste was bitter. They had made their statement, but the war was far from won. President Corrin stood before the world's leaders, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. They had struck the first blow, but what came next would determine the fate of humanity's future in the galaxy. The people of Earth, however, were resolute. Their support for the cause grew with every passing hour. The streets were filled with chants and cries of defiance, not just for the child who had been taken from them, but for every person who had suffered under the Council's rule. The damage done to the outpost was no longer just a symbol of humanity's strength. It was a rallying cry for all who had been oppressed by the galaxy's ruling elite. Meanwhile, Captain Arcos and his crew stood on the bridge of the Resolution, watching as the stars streaked by in their wake. The mission had been a success, but Arcos knew the battle was far from over. The Council's retaliatory forces would come sooner or later, and when they did, Earth would need to be ready. The fleet's next move was already being planned, a campaign that would hit deeper into Council territory and show the galaxy that humanity would not stop at one victory. Arcos's mind raced with possibilities as he watched the stars, his thoughts not on the destruction they had caused, but on the future ahead. The fight for Earth's place in the galaxy was just beginning, and every step would be more dangerous than the last. But one thing was clear: the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. As news of Earth's victory spread to distant star systems, and the power of the Galactic Council began to falter, the galaxy found itself at a crossroads. Alliances that had once seemed unbreakable began to fracture, and in the distance, the rumble of war grew louder. The old order was crumbling, and humanity stood at the center of it all, poised to reshape the future. The attack on the Council's outpost had sent ripples through the galaxy, but it was what followed that truly changed the balance of power. As the weeks passed, The once untouchable authority of the Galactic Council began to fracture, cracks appearing where there had once been a solid, unwavering foundation. The Council's retaliatory forces, mobilized in haste, had made the mistake of underestimating Earth's resolve, and now the galaxy was starting to take notice. Systems once neutral or even allied with the Council now found themselves rethinking their positions. Some began sending covert messages to Earth's leadership, offering intelligence on Council movements, and sharing resources in exchange for future promises of protection against the Council's wrath. Others, more bold, declared their independence from the Council's rule, citing Earth's defiance as a catalyst for their own liberation from the Council's oppressive control. It was no longer a war between one planet and an all-powerful galactic faction. It was becoming a rebellion, a movement that was gathering strength with each passing day. The tide was turning, and Captain Jason Arcos knew it was only a matter of time before the Council tried to mount a full-scale offensive against Earth's fleet. They had made their first mistake, and they would likely make others, but the question remained: how far would the Council go to reassert its dominance? Arcos had spent his entire career studying military strategy, and he knew the Council would not sit idly by. Not after the embarrassment of the first strike on their territory. It was only a matter of time before they gathered their forces for a decisive counterattack. But what Arcos and his fleet had gained was a window to press their advantage and force the galaxy to rethink its assumptions about humanity's place in the stars. Back on Earth, President Corran's administration worked feverishly to maintain the momentum of the revolt. The Council's response to the initial attack had only fueled Earth's determination, and the population's resolve had only hardened. The people of Earth no longer feared the Council. They no longer feared their oppressors. They had been shown that even the most powerful empire in the galaxy could be struck down. And it was this knowledge that had ignited a fire that was spreading quickly. Earth's military continued to deploy increasingly sophisticated technologies, all derived from the early secrets that had been hidden for centuries, and now unearthed. A fleet of heavily modified ships, once thought to be experimental, now became Earth's vanguard in the fight for freedom and survival in orbit. Stations long left dormant became the heart of Earth's growing war machine. With each passing day, new alliances formed, and new strategies emerged with an edge of creativity that only humanity could bring. Meanwhile, Captain Arcos, standing at the helm of the Resolution, reviewed the fleet's next steps. The initial skirmish had been a resounding success, but that was only the beginning. They had to push further into the heart of the Council's territory, striking not just at military targets, but at their very core. Their will to rule with an iron fist. The next target was not just a military installation or a communication outpost, but a symbol of the Council's power, a sprawling hub of bureaucracy and control that served as the administrative heart of the Council itself. But Arcos knew they had to be careful. They could not afford to repeat the mistakes of the past, where overconfidence led to a costly misstep. Their forces were still outnumbered, still outgunned by the full might of the Council's fleets. They would need to act with precision, to take what they could without overextending their reach, and he would need every man and woman in his fleet to be prepared for the worst. As Earth's forces continued to mobilize, Arcos could sense the change that had begun to sweep across the galaxy. The fear that once kept the galaxy's weaker races under the Council's thumb was now being replaced by a boldness that was spreading like wildfire. The galaxy was on the brink of a new era. And the Council, despite all its power, was starting to realize they had underestimated humanity's spirit, because no matter how many times Earth was knocked down, it always got back up, ready to fight again. The tide had indeed turned, and humanity, fueled by the fires of defiance, was no longer the hunted, but the hunter. The next phase of the war would not only define Earth's future, but the future of the galaxy itself. The day the Council's full fleet arrived, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The sight of their massive warships, sleek, intimidating, and brimming with power, filling the void, was a sight to behold. They were led by a Council admiral, known for his ruthless efficiency, Admiral Tarath, whose reputation for quelling rebellions with swift and overwhelming force was legendary. Earth had anticipated this move, but the sheer size and firepower of the fleet still sent a chill down the spine of every officer on the Resolution as Captain Jason Arcos stood at the helm. He could feel the weight of what was to come. The fight for survival had reached its peak. The Council had gathered all its might, and now they were coming for Earth with everything they had, but Arcos had no intention of backing down. This was the moment when humanity would either prove its place among the stars or be wiped out by those who sought to dominate the galaxy. There would be no retreat, no surrender. Earth had already paid a heavy price for this war, and they would not let the sacrifice of their people be in vain. In the midst of the tense buildup, President Corrin stood in Earth's war room, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his eyes fixed on the holographic display, showing the massive Council fleet approaching Earth's border, the nerve center of humanity's resistance. This room was filled with top strategists and military minds who had been working nonstop to ensure Earth's survival. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew that every battle fought and won was another step toward freedom. Corrin gave a final order. The fleet would meet the Council head-on and make them bleed for every inch of space. They claimed Earth had already proven its willingness to fight, but this time the stakes were even higher. The enemy fleet was far superior in number and firepower, but Earth had learned the art of unconventional warfare, surprising tactics, ruthless efficiency, and most importantly, the determination to fight for their very existence. As Earth's fleet powered into position, Arcos stood before his crew once more. His voice was calm but carried the unmistakable gravity of the moment. "We're not just fighting for Earth today," he said, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his officers. "We're fighting for every race in this galaxy that's been crushed under the Council's boot. We're fighting for freedom, for justice, and for the right to exist as equals with the rest of the galaxy. Today, we show them who we are." The battle began with an intensity that made the stars themselves seem to tremble. The first volley of weapons erupted from the human fleet, cutting through the void with blinding speed and precision. But even as they launched their attack, Arcos knew the odds were staggering. The Council's forces came in waves, their sheer numbers overwhelming, but Earth's fleet, though smaller, was agile, maneuvering with a speed and grace that the Council's ships, larger and bulkier, could not match. The Resolution danced between enemy fire, launching missiles that tore through enemy vessels, sending them into chaos. Earth's fleet exploited every weakness in the Council's formations, striking at their supply lines, their communications hubs, and their weak spots. The Council had expected a conventional engagement, but humanity's battle style was unpredictable, driven by the desperation of survival and the knowledge that they had no other option but to win. Admiral Tarath, watching from his flagship, cursed in disbelief as his fleet faltered in the face of Earth's relentless assault. The humans were not acting like the prey he had expected them to be, but something far more dangerous, a predator who had finally found its teeth. He ordered his ships to regroup, to push forward and crush the humans in one decisive strike. But the Earth fleet had already anticipated this move and was ready. The battle raged for hours, both sides suffering heavy losses, but as the dust settled, it was clear that Earth had landed a powerful blow. The Council's fleet, though still formidable, had been broken, its formation shattered, its cohesion lost. Earth had done the impossible. They had forced the Council to retreat, to regroup, and for the first time in centuries, the great empire of the galaxy was on the defensive. Captain Arcos stood on the bridge of the Resolution, watching as the Council ships limped away from the battlefield. His heart was heavy, but his mind was clear. This was not yet the end, but it was the beginning of the end for the Galactic Council. They had shown the galaxy that Earth was not to be trifled with, that humanity would not be cowed, and that they would fight, no matter the odds, to carve out their place in the stars. And as Arcos gazed into the depths of space, he knew that this victory would reverberate across the galaxy for years to come. Earth had shown the galaxy that it was no longer a pawn, but a force to be reckoned with. The aftermath of the battle left a stunned galaxy in its wake. The Council, for the first time in its long history, was on the defensive. Earth's audacity had forced the Council to retreat, its once pristine fleets now scattered and damaged across the cosmos. Yet, despite the clear victory, Captain Jason Arcos knew this was only the beginning. The first wave of the battle had been won. But the war for humanity's future was far from over. The Council would regroup, it would retaliate, and it would bring everything it had to bear against Earth. Its pride and its power had been wounded, and it would not take kindly to being humbled. But for the moment, humanity had the upper hand. The Resolution and its fleet returned to Earth, hailed as heroes by a population whose unity had never been more solidified. The streets of Earth's cities were filled with celebrations, but in the war rooms and command centers, the leaders knew the true work had just begun. President Corrin addressed the world, his voice reverberating across every screen. "We have shown the galaxy that we will not bow down to tyranny," he said, "that humanity will fight, with every last breath, to protect our freedom and our future. But this is not just about Earth. It is about every world under the Council's heel, every race that has suffered under their reign. This is a call for freedom, for justice, and for equality in the galaxy." As the celebrations unfolded, the question of what came next loomed heavily. The Resolution and its fleet were not just symbols of defiance. They were now the backbone of humanity's military and the foundation of an unprecedented alliance with those who had once been subjects of the Council's empire. The fractured galaxy now stood at a precipice, a moment of uncertainty where new alliances could be forged and old powers could crumble. Earth had proven itself capable of defeating the most powerful entity in the galaxy, and it had sparked a movement that no one could ignore. Captain Arcos stood on the bridge of the Resolution, staring out into the vastness of space. His thoughts were a mixture of pride and apprehension. The fight for survival was over. But what kind of future awaited humanity? How would Earth navigate the shifting tides of galactic politics, especially when so many old powers still viewed them with disdain? How could humanity not only defend its home, but ensure the galaxy would never fall under the oppressive thumb of the Council again? In the coming weeks, Earth and its allies began forging new treaties, new pacts of cooperation. A coalition of the free races began to form, united in their shared experiences of oppression at the hands of the Council. The messages of resistance sent by Earth echoed across the stars, sparking revolutions and uprisings on distant planets. In many places, systems that had long lived under the Council's control broke free, seeking sanctuary and leadership from Earth and its fleet. The galaxy, once held in the grip of fear and dominance, was now slowly turning toward a new age, a time of rebirth, of rebuilding, and of rediscovery. But the Council, despite its retreat, was far from broken. It was not a foe that could simply be defeated by force alone. The remnants of its power remained vast, and its influence over the galaxy's politics could not be easily undone. Its leaders, humiliated but unyielding, began regrouping in the shadows, plotting their next moves. It would not be long before the galaxy would feel the pressure of their wrath once again. And yet, in this new era, Earth stood firm. The human race had proven its worth, its strength, and its resilience. It had risen from the ashes of oppression to challenge the very powers that sought to crush it. Its warriors, both military and civilian, stood united with a single cause: to never again allow the horrors of the past to define their future. Earth's fleets would be at the ready, its people prepared to defend their hard-won freedom against all odds. In the quiet moments, as Arcos gazed out of the stars, he knew that humanity's true strength lay not in the weapons they wielded, but in the will to survive, to fight for what was right, and to stand tall no matter the size of the enemy that came against them. They had sent a message to the galaxy, and the stars themselves seemed to listen. Earth would no longer be a passive bystander in the galaxy's great play. It would be a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy had changed forever, and Earth's place in it had been secured, not through submission, but through the fire of rebellion and the iron will to claim its destiny among the stars.